Every month, my husband visited his mother at the nursing home until the day my mother-in-law showed up at our house asking why he never visited her. Hello, dear ones. I'm Margaret Henderson. I'm 85 years old, and today I'm going to share with you the story that changed my life forever. Before I begin, if you're enjoying this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the Grandma's Diary for more stories like this one. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing that my stories reach people from different places. It was 1968. I was 26 years old and believed I had built a perfect life. I was born in a small Midwestern town where young ladies were raised to be good wives and mothers. I married at 19 to Theodore Whitman, a charming young man who worked at the town bank. Everyone said we were lucky to have found each other. He was considered a good catch, hard-working, respected in the community, and son of a prominent local family. I was seen as a proper young lady who knew how to cook, sew, and keep house like no one else. Our house was on a tree-lined street with a small garden in front where I grew roses. We had 3 children, David, 6 years old, Susan, 4, and little Bobby, just 2 years old. On Sundays, I would wake up early to prepare a cornbread that Theodore loved so much. The aroma would fill the entire house while the children were still sleeping. Our Sunday mornings had an almost sacred routine. For 3 consecutive years, on the first Sunday of each month, the scene repeated itself. Theodore would get up earlier than usual, put on his only suit, apply his best cologne, and say, "I'm going to visit Mother at the nursing home." Before leaving, he would always stop by the flower shop that opened especially for him and buy a bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums. "Her favorites," he would say. I would prepare a basket with homemade sweets for him to take to his mother and the nursing home staff. I never questioned these visits. In fact, I admired what a devoted son Theodore seemed to be. In 1968, we women weren't encouraged to ask many questions. Our role was to trust, care for, and maintain household harmony. I had never met my mother-in-law personally. Theodore explained that she had been admitted to the nursing home right after our wedding when she began showing signs of mental confusion. "It's better this way," he would say. "You don't need to carry this burden with me." Theodore would return from these visits always in the late afternoon, with teary eyes, telling me how Mrs. Catherine was becoming increasingly frail, how sometimes she didn't even recognize him. I would prepare tea and listen attentively, offering words of comfort. "You're an exemplary son," I would say, while holding his hands. And he would smile, a smile I couldn't completely decipher. Our life followed its peaceful course. Theodore was the branch manager at the bank, earning a salary that allowed us to live comfortably, though without luxuries. I took care of the house and children, did sewing work for some families in town, and was an active member of the church community. In everyone's eyes, we were the picture of the perfect family of that era. I remember perfectly that April morning in 1968. The sky was exceptionally blue. It was an ordinary Wednesday. David and Susan had gone to school, and little Bobby was playing in the backyard while I prepared lunch. The smell of beans with bacon filled the kitchen. I was humming a song playing on the radio, a hit by Elvis Presley that was popular at the time. That's when I heard knocking at the door. We weren't expecting visitors. I dried my hands on the floral apron I was wearing and went to answer. I opened the door and found myself face to face with a lady with completely white hair, wearing a simple, somewhat faded dress and a shawl over her shoulders despite the heat. She had penetrating brown eyes that reminded me of someone, but I couldn't immediately identify who. "You must be Margaret," she said with a trembling but firm voice. There was a dignity in her gaze that impressed me. "I'm Catherine, Theodore's mother. I came to find out why my son never visits me." In that instant, I felt as if the ground had disappeared from under my feet. My mind was trying to process what was happening. How could this lady be standing at my door when she should be in a nursing home, as Theodore had been telling me for years? I was paralyzed for a few seconds, not knowing how to react or what to say. "Ma'am, there must be some mistake," I finally managed to stammer. My husband visits you every first Sunday of the month. He was with you just 3 days ago." Mrs. Catherine looked at me with a mixture of confusion and sadness. "My dear, I haven't seen my Theodore in over 2 years. I only receive some letters from time to time, saying he's working in another city and can't visit me." Her voice faltered slightly, and I could see how much this situation hurt her. My heart began to race. There was something very wrong with this story. Theodore had never mentioned working in another city. He was here every day, coming home after his shift at the bank. And what about the nursing home, the monthly visits, the yellow chrysanthemums, the stories about her deteriorating health? "Please come in," I said, trying to maintain my composure. My thoughts were in complete disarray, but something told me not to show my shock in front of this lady who seemed so fragile and yet so brave for having come there. I invited Mrs. Catherine to sit at the kitchen table. She entered slowly, observing every detail of the house. Her eyes lingered on the family photographs on the sideboard, Theodore with the children, our wedding, birthdays. "So these are my grandchildren," she said with a sad smile. "I've never been able to meet them." I served coffee for both of us. My hands were shaking so much I almost spilled the drink. Bobby came running into the kitchen, curious to meet the visitor. Mrs. Catherine looked at him tenderly, but didn't dare touch him. "He looks like Theodore when he was little," she commented with tears in her eyes. That's when she opened her worn purse and took out a small bundle of letters carefully tied with a ribbon. "These are the letters Theodore sent me over the past few years," she explained, "always saying he's working hard in a distant city, that he'll come visit me soon, that he loves me very much." With trembling hands, I took the letters. I immediately recognized my husband's handwriting. These were letters I had never seen him write, letters full of excuses, empty promises, and lies. Lies about where he was, about what he was doing, about our life. While I read, Mrs. Catherine continued talking, telling me she lived alone in a tiny house on the other side of town. She survived by washing clothes for some families and with the small pension left by her late husband. I always hoped Theodore would come help me, especially after I became a widow, but he said work wouldn't allow it. The reality began forming before me like a macabre puzzle. Theodore's monthly visits always coincided with the day he received his salary. He would leave well-dressed, with flowers and sweets, and return only in the late afternoon, always with sad stories about his mother's deteriorating health. But she was there in front of me, confused and hurt at being abandoned by her son. "St. Mary's Nursing Home. Where exactly is it located?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Nursing home? What nursing home?" Mrs. Catherine responded, genuinely confused. "I've never been in any nursing home. I've lived in the same little house since I got married, over 50 years ago." At that moment, I was certain. There was no nursing home, no monthly visits to his sick mother. It was all one big, elaborate, and cruel lie. But if Theodore wasn't visiting his mother, where was he going all those first Sundays of the month? Where was the salary money he said he used to help with Mrs. Catherine's treatment costs? I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor taking over my body. The lunch on the stove had already burned, but that was the least of my problems at that moment. I looked at Mrs. Catherine, this lady who had been so unfairly abandoned by her son, and felt a mixture of compassion and solidarity. We were two women deceived by the same man. "Would you like to have lunch with us?" I asked, trying to buy time to organize my thoughts. Mrs. Catherine accepted with a shy smile. I began preparing another meal while she played with Bobby on the kitchen floor. Watching that scene, I thought about how my children had been deprived of their grandmother's company because of Theodore's lies. I decided I would wait for my husband to come home to confront him. I wanted to hear from his own mouth why he had told so many lies, where he went on those Sundays, what he was hiding from me and his own mother. Anger began to replace the initial shock, but I tried not to show it in front of Mrs. Catherine and the children. That afternoon, while the children napped, Mrs. Catherine told me more about her life, how difficult it had been to raise Theodore alone after her husband's early death. How she had worked hard to give him a good education so he could have opportunities she never had. He was such a good boy, so affectionate, she said nostalgically. I don't know what happened to make him change so much. The hours passed slowly. Soon the older children would arrive from school, and then Theodore would return from work. How would I explain Mrs. Catherine's presence? How would I confront the lies that had sustained our marriage for so long? I felt betrayed, deceived, humiliated, but I also felt a strength growing within me, a determination I didn't know I possessed. The clock on the wall showed 4:30 p.m. when I heard David and Susan arriving from school. I took a deep breath, preparing to explain who this lady sitting in our kitchen was. "Children," I called them with the calmest voice I could manage. "Come meet Grandma Catherine." That night, the hours dragged as if time conspired against me. I prepared dinner with Mrs. Catherine by my side, teaching me old family recipes that Theodore loved so much. My hands trembled while cutting vegetables, thinking about how I would confront my husband. The children were enchanted with their grandmother they never knew existed. David showed his school drawings. Susan wouldn't leave her lap, and little Bobby followed her around the house like a chick following a hen. "Grandma, why didn't you ever come visit us before?" Susan asked with the innocence of her 4 years. I saw Mrs. Catherine's face pale, but she answered with a sweetness that moved me. "Sometimes life separates us from the people we love, my little angel. But what matters is that I'm here now." The living room clock struck 6 o'clock. Theodore always arrived at 6:15 punctually. I felt my stomach turn. Mrs. Catherine noticed my nervousness and held my hands. "Strength, my daughter. Whatever the truth is, we'll face it together." In that moment, this lady I had just met gave me more security than anyone in my entire life. At 6:20, I heard the familiar sound of the key in the lock. The children ran to the door, shouting, "Daddy, Daddy," as they did every day. I stood paralyzed in the kitchen next to Mrs. Catherine. I heard Theodore's voice greeting the children, the sound of his briefcase being placed on the sideboard, his footsteps heading to the kitchen. "Margaret, what do we have for dinner?" His words died in the air when his eyes met his mother's. I saw the blood drain from his face. He became pale as a ghost, mouth open, unable to complete the sentence or move. It was as if he had seen a spirit. And in a way, that's exactly what it was. For him, his mother should have been confined in a nursing home, too far away to discover his lies. "Son?" Mrs. Catherine's voice came out low, almost a whisper. There was no anger in her tone, just a deep sadness that broke my heart. "Mother, what? How did you get here?" Theodore stammered, looking from his mother to me, clearly trying to understand what was happening and how to handle this unexpected situation. "I took 3 buses and asked in the town square where the bank manager's house was," she answered simply. "People in this town know you, son. They're always talking about what a good man you are." Theodore swallowed hard. I saw his hands tremble as he loosened his tie. "Children," he said with a strangely controlled voice, "go play in the backyard for a while before dinner. Daddy needs to talk with Grandma and Mommy." I waited for the children to leave before speaking. My heart was beating so loud I thought he could hear it. "Where do you go every first Sunday of the month, Theodore? And don't tell me it's to visit your mother at the nursing home, because now we know that's a lie." He threw himself into a chair, his head in his hands. For a long moment, no one said anything. The only sound in the kitchen was the tick-tock of the clock and the bubbling of soup on the stove. Finally, he raised his head. His eyes were teary, but I couldn't feel compassion. I wanted answers. "I can explain," he began, but his voice failed. "Then explain," I demanded, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "Explain why you lied to me for 3 years. Explain why you abandoned your mother, making her believe you were working in another city. Explain where the money goes that you say you used to pay for the nursing home." Mrs. Catherine remained silent, her eyes fixed on the son she hadn't seen in over 2 years. There was a dignity in her posture that impressed me. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just waited, as she probably had waited all this time, hoping for a visit that never happened. Theodore hesitated, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of desperation. I have another family. The words fell like stones in the silence of the kitchen. Another family. 3 simple words that destroyed everything I believed to be true in my life. I met Linda 4 years ago on a business trip to Chicago, he continued, without the courage to look into the eyes of either his mother or his wife. She got pregnant. We have a daughter named Emma. She's 3 years old now. Each word was like a stab. While I took care of our children, maintained our house impeccably, and waited for him every night with dinner ready, he was building another life a few hours away. The weight of betrayal was almost physical, as if something was crushing me. And every first Sunday of the month, I asked, although I already knew the answer. I go visit them. I take the month's money to them. Mrs. Catherine finally spoke, her calm voice contrasting with the storm of emotions I felt. And the letters saying you were working far away. Why lie to your own mother? Theodore seemed to shrink with each question. I didn't know what to say, how to explain. I thought it would be easier this way. Easier for whom, Theodore? I asked, anger growing within me. For you, while your mother could barely support herself, while I lived a lie? That's when the most painful truth came to light. Everyone knew, he confessed, defeated. In town, at the bank, everyone knew about Linda and Emma, except you and Mom. I felt my blood freeze. The humiliation was unbearable. All those church ladies, the other bank employees' wives, the town merchants, they all knew I was the deceived wife. They all looked at me, talked to me, smiled at me, knowing my husband had another woman, another daughter. How long did you intend to continue this farce? I asked, tears finally overcoming my resistance and flowing freely down my face. I don't know, Theodore answered, seeming genuinely confused. I never planned it. It just happened. And then each lie led to another and another. At that moment, I looked out the kitchen window and saw our children playing in the yard, oblivious to the storm destroying our family. David was pushing Susan on the swing that Theodore had built on a sunny Sunday. Bobby was chasing a butterfly, laughing. The scene of normalcy contrasted cruelly with the chaos inside the house. And now? I asked, more to myself than to him. Theodore raised his eyes, a glimmer of hope passing through them. We can continue as before. No one needs to know you found out. I can help financially, Mom. Continue our normal life. The audacity of his suggestion left me speechless. He really believed we could return to normal after that I would accept sharing him with another woman, knowing the whole town was talking behind my back. Mrs. Catherine slowly stood from her chair, approached her son, and, to my surprise, gently placed her hand on his shoulder. Theodore, she said with a firmness that didn't match her fragile appearance, you are not the man I raised. What you did to us was unforgivable. She turned to me, a new resolution in her eyes. Margaret, I don't know what you'll decide to do, but I'm too old to live with lies. If you'll allow me, I'd like to get to know my grandchildren better before returning to my house. At that moment, something broke inside me. The entire life I knew, all the plans, all the certainties, everything crumbled. But amid the rubble, I also felt a strange liberation. The truth, however painful, was better than the lie I had been living. You're not going back to your house, I said to Mrs. Catherine, with a determination I didn't even know I possessed. You're staying here with your grandchildren. I turned to Theodore, who looked at me stunned. And you're leaving. What? He almost shouted. This is my house. You can't throw me out. This house is in your father's name, Mrs. Catherine intervened, and he left it to me before he died. I'm the one who gave it to you when you got married. Technically, the house is mine. Theodore's expression was one of pure shock. He had never imagined that his fragile mother and his submissive wife could unite against him in such a way. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave, I continued, my voice surprisingly firm. You can go to your other family. I'm sure your Linda will be happy to receive you permanently." He tried to argue, plead, even threaten, but nothing changed our decision. We called the children inside, served dinner as if nothing had happened, and then put them to bed. Only then did Theodore, defeated, pack a suitcase, fill it with some clothes and personal objects, and leave through the door without looking back. That night was the longest of my life. I cried until I had no more tears, while Mrs. Catherine held my hand in silence. When the sun began to rise, illuminating the kitchen with golden light, she finally spoke. "The day is dawning, my daughter, and so is our new life." I looked at this woman, who until the day before was a complete stranger to me. Now we were two survivors of the same tragedy, united by a bond neither of us had chosen, but that seemed stronger than any other. "What are we going to do?" I asked, exhausted and scared of the uncertain future that awaited us. Mrs. Catherine smiled, a smile that reached her tired eyes. "We're going to survive, my daughter. And more than that, we're going to show Theodore and this entire town that we're stronger than they imagine." That morning, when the children woke up and asked about their father, I simply said he had to travel for work. I wasn't ready to explain the truth to them. Not yet, but I knew that moment would come, and it would be another challenge to face. The first day without Theodore was a whirlwind of emotions and practical decisions. We needed money to survive. The bank account was in his name, and I didn't have access. The little money I earned with my sewing work would barely cover a week of groceries. Sitting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Catherine while the children played in the living room, we tried to find a solution. "What are your skills, Margaret?" she asked objectively. "I know how to sew, cook, take care of children. The things every woman my age knows how to do," I answered, realizing for the first time how limited that sounded. "I also know how to cook," said Mrs. Catherine, a sparkle appearing in her eyes. "Actually, before I got married, I worked as a kitchen assistant in the mayor's house. I learned many fine recipes, and you, from what I saw yesterday, have a special gift for sweets." That's how, without realizing it, we began to plant the seed of what would become our salvation. While we talked about recipes and possibilities, breathing in the aroma of fresh coffee and hearing the children's laughter in the background, something new began to be born from the ashes of our destroyed lives. The first days after Theodore's departure were the most difficult of my life. I woke up every morning with the feeling that everything had been a nightmare, but soon reality imposed itself. I was alone with 3 small children to raise and no guaranteed source of income. Well, not completely alone. Mrs. Catherine, who quickly became just Mother Catherine to me, was by my side at every step. When news that Theodore had left the house spread through town, reactions were diverse. Some neighbors came to offer support, others just wanted to satisfy their morbid curiosity. Pitying looks followed us down the street when we went out shopping. "Poor Margaret, abandoned with 3 children," I heard them whisper behind my back. That ate away at me inside. I didn't want to be anyone's object of pity. At the bank where Theodore worked, the situation became unbearable. He continued as manager, since no one dared question his personal life, while I was treated like a pariah when I went to request some money from the account I discovered was practically empty. "Mr. Theodore authorized only this amount for household expenses," the teller would tell me with an air of superiority. The money barely covered food for the week. A month after his departure, I received a message to appear at the town's notary office. There, a severe-looking lawyer informed me that Theodore was requesting a divorce and offering minimal child support. Divorce in 1968 in our small Midwestern town was practically a scandal. I would forever be marked as a divorced woman, something little better than a leper in the eyes of conservative society. "Accept the terms, ma'am," the lawyer advised with false compassion. "Mr. Theodore is being generous, considering the circumstances." I returned home devastated, the divorce document weighing in my purse as if it were made of lead. Mother Catherine was waiting for me on the porch, knitting a little sweater for Bobby. Her calm demeanor contrasted with my internal agitation. "He wants a divorce," I announced, collapsing into the chair beside her. and offers a pittance as child support. Mother Catherine put down her knitting and looked at me with that serenity that always impressed me. "And what do you want, Margaret?" Her question caught me by surprise. No one had asked me what I wanted. Everyone simply assumed I would accept whatever fate Theodore chose for me, as I always had. "I want my dignity back," I answered after a moment of reflection. "I want to show my children that a woman doesn't need a man to survive. I want this town to respect both of us instead of looking at us with pity." A gentle smile appeared on Mother Catherine's lips. "Then that's what we'll do, not with lamentations or revenge, but with hard, honest work." That's how that same afternoon, the idea of our small bakery was born. At first, it would be something modest, cakes and sweets made at home, to sell to neighbors, and perhaps supply for some occasional party. We began to survey what we would need: ingredients, pans, a new oven, since ours was old and problematic. The initial investment seemed impossible with the little money we had. "I have some savings put away," said Mother Catherine timidly. "It's not much, but it might help buy what we need to start." I discovered then that, despite the difficulties, she always saved some coins under her mattress for emergencies, as she said. That money, added to what I got by selling some jewelry Theodore had given me over the years, was enough to get us started. We transformed the living room into our production area. The sofa and armchairs were stacked in the guest room, and in their place we put a large table to work the dough and decorate the sweets. We bought a new oven on credit and some basic pans. Mother Catherine brought from her house old family recipe books, some so yellowed and fragile we had to turn them with extreme care so they wouldn't fall apart. "This book is over 100 years old," she explained, showing a leather-bound notebook with elegant, faded handwriting. "It belonged to my grandmother, who was a cook in a noble family's house in Ireland before coming to America. These are recipes no one else knows." We spent nights studying those recipes, adapting them with available ingredients, testing different versions. The children became our official tasters, and their satisfied little faces when trying a new cake or pudding were our best seal of approval. David, at 6 years old, took on the role of man of the house with touching seriousness. He helped carry groceries, arrange pans, and occasionally asked, "Mommy, are we rich yet? Can I stop worrying?" Susan, always artistic, took charge of drawing the signs that advertised our products. And little Bobby? Well, he was content licking the dirty spoons with frosting when he thought no one was looking. Our first order came from Mrs. Williams, a neighbor who needed sweets for her daughter's birthday. We made brownies, cupcakes, and lemon bars, the traditional ones, but we also took a risk with a recipe from Mother Catherine's notebook. Small almond cakes with caramel filling that she called Queen's Delights. Mrs. Williams hesitated initially. "No one knows this sweet. What if the children don't like it?" But she eventually gave in to our insistence to include at least one tray as an experiment. The next day, she knocked on our door before breakfast. You won't believe it. The Queen's Delights were an absolute success. Everyone wanted to know where I bought them, who made them, if they could order them for their own parties. It was as if a dam burst. News spread through town at impressive speed. Suddenly, we had orders for birthday parties, baptisms, engagements, and even for the mayor's wife's afternoon tea. We worked from dawn to dusk, Mother Catherine and I, with the children helping as they could. We called our small business Catherine's Sweets, in honor of my mother-in-law, who had become my partner and friend. We had simple cards made with the name and address that we distributed with orders. Soon, it was no longer necessary. Everyone in town knew where to find those wonderful sweets that only the two of us made. With the first profits, we could improve our equipment. We bought more pans, superior quality utensils, special ingredients that before seemed like unattainable luxuries. We also began saving part for the children's education. I was determined to give them opportunities I never had. The living room space soon became insufficient. After 6 months of intensive work, we decided to make a bolder renovation, transformed the entire front of the house into a small shop with display windows to show our sweets and some tables for those who wanted to have coffee and try our creations on the spot. We hired Mr. Jenkins, a widowed carpenter who accepted payment partly in sweets for his grandchildren, and got to work. The children were fascinated by the house's transformation. "We're going to be like a real bakery," exclaimed Susan, clapping with excitement. The new shop's inauguration happened on a sunny Sunday in April 1969, exactly 1 year after that unexpected visit that changed our lives. We had a small event with balloons at the entrance and free samples of various sweets. To my surprise, almost the entire town showed up. Even those who used to gossip behind my back now stood in line to try our treats. Among the guests was the editor of the local newspaper, who was so impressed he offered us a free feature story. "You are an example of overcoming adversity," he said, taking pictures of the shop, of us, of the children helping serve customers. "The town needs to know your story." The article came out the following week with the title, "Catherine's Sweets, The Taste of Triumph." The text told our story without going into details about the reason for the separation, but highlighted how 2 women had managed to build a prosperous business in less than a year, against all expectations. The impact was immediate. Customers from neighboring towns began to appear, curious to know the famous Queen's Delights and other house specialties. We received proposals to supply sweets for larger events like weddings and graduations. Soon we needed to hire help, 2 girls from the neighborhood who came in the morning to assist with production. In the midst of all this excitement, I received a letter from Theodore. He had heard about the bakery's success and wanted to reconcile our family. The words sounded false, especially when he mentioned that Linda had left him and taken their daughter to live with her parents in another city. "We made mistakes, Margaret, but we can start over for the children's sake." I read the letter sitting on the porch steps while watching Mother Catherine teach Susan how to braid her doll's hair. In the yard, David and Bobby were playing ball, laughing loudly when one of them missed the kick. The house was impregnated with the sweet smell of vanilla and cinnamon. Our life had found a new rhythm, a new joy. I folded the letter carefully and stored it in a drawer. I didn't need to respond immediately. For the first time, I had the power to choose my own path, without pressure or fear of others' judgment. The insecure girl I once was, who believed she needed a man to survive in this world, was slowly giving way to a confident, independent woman. That night, after the children fell asleep, Mother Catherine and I sat in the kitchen to plan the next day's production. We had a large order for the pharmacist's daughter's wedding reception. 200 assorted sweets and a 4-tier cake decorated with sugar flowers. "You know, Margaret," she said, while writing down the list of ingredients we would need to buy, "when I knocked on your door that day, so long ago, I never imagined I would be starting the best phase of my life." I looked at her with surprise. "Even after everything that happened, the disappointment with Theodore?" She smiled, that serene smile that had become my safe harbor. "Life is made of losses and gains, my daughter. I lost my illusions about my son, it's true, but I gained a daughter in you, 3 wonderful grandchildren, and a purpose for my final years. Nothing is by chance." Her words stayed with me as I fell asleep that night. Nothing is by chance. That unexpected visit, which at first seemed like a catastrophe, had transformed into my life's salvation. Between sugar, flour, and eggs, I had found not just my livelihood, but my freedom and my worth. And that, at that time, for a woman like me, was worth more than all the gold in the world. The year 1970 arrived, bringing winds of change to our small bakery. What had begun as a desperate means of survival had transformed into a thriving business known beyond our town's borders. Catherine's Sweets no longer fit just in our house's living room. Customers lined up on the sidewalk on Sundays to buy our specialties, and orders for parties and events accumulated in our notebook, often months in advance. "We need to expand," said Mother Catherine one night after we closed the shop, exhausted after a particularly busy day. We had just delivered an order for the mayor's daughter's wedding, 500 assorted sweets and a 5-tier cake that took us 3 days to prepare. We can't keep turning away customers for lack of space. She was right, as always. In recent weeks, we had stopped accepting several large orders simply because our kitchen, however much we had adapted it, couldn't handle the necessary production. Our two assistants, Grace and Dorothy, barely had room to move between the ovens and counters. But expanding meant investing, and investing meant taking risks. The money we earned was good, but most went to household expenses, the children's education, and our small emergency savings. After everything we'd been through, the idea of taking on debt scared me. It was David, then almost 9 years old, who brought us the solution. Coming home from school that afternoon, he came running, excited with news. "Mom, the mansion on the corner of the square is for sale. There's a huge sign in front." The mansion he referred to was an old, elegant construction that had belonged to the Patterson family for generations. They said in town that the last heir, an elderly gentleman without children, had decided to move to Chicago to be closer to doctors. The place had been vacant for months. The next day, moved more by curiosity than real intention to buy, I went to the mansion. It was an imposing building with a Victorian-style facade, large windows, and a small front garden. The location was perfect, right on the town square where everyone passed on their way to church or the market. The realtor, a thin man with thick glasses, recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Margaret from Catherine's Suites, what an honor to receive you. Did you come to see the property?" I explained I was just looking, evaluating possibilities. He, sensing the smell of a potential sale, got excited to show the whole place. The space was ample, with rooms that would work perfectly for the shop, production, and even a small cafe, as I secretly dreamed. Upstairs, there were several bedrooms. We could live right there, without needing to commute. When I asked the price, my heart almost stopped. It was a fortune far beyond what we could pay. I thanked the realtor and returned home discouraged. "Don't be like that," Mother Catherine consoled me when I told her about the mansion. "If this place isn't meant to be, we'll find another or continue here for now." But the seed had been planted. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about that mansion, imagining how it would be to transfer our bakery there, to have space to grow, to create new products, to receive more customers. 3 days later, I received an unexpected visit. The bank manager, not Theodore, who had been transferred to another city months before, but his replacement, a gentleman named Augustus, who had always been kind to us, came personally to the bakery. "Mrs. Margaret," he began after accepting a cup of coffee and one of our Queen's Delights, "I heard you're interested in the Patterson mansion." I was surprised how quickly news traveled in that town. "I just looked at the property," I responded cautiously. "It's beautiful, but it's beyond our means." "Maybe it's not," he smiled, taking some papers from his briefcase. "The bank would be interested in financing the purchase for you. Your business has shown impressive growth, and we have confidence in its potential." I looked at him incredulously. In 1970, it wasn't common for banks to offer significant loans for businesses run by women, especially a divorced woman and an elderly lady. "Why?" I asked directly. Augustus wasn't offended by my frankness. "Business is business, Mrs. Margaret. You've proven to be a competent entrepreneur. Besides," he hesitated a bit, "let's say the bank feels it has a moral debt to you and Mrs. Catherine, considering certain past circumstances." I understood the message between the lines. The bank and probably the entire board knew about Theodore's actions, how he had deceived us, and perhaps had even been complicit by not alerting us. This was their way of compensating. "I'll think about it," I replied, still hesitant. "I need to talk with Mother Catherine and do some calculations." That night, after the children went to bed, we sat at the kitchen table with pencil and paper. We made calculations, projections, optimistic and pessimistic scenarios. We analyzed every detail, every possibility. The conclusion was clear. With the financing offered by the bank, it would be tight but possible. Should we do this? We finally decided, already past midnight, with hands stained with ink and heads buzzing with ideas for the new space. The following months were of intense work. Besides maintaining the bakery's daily production, we supervised the mansion's renovation to adapt it to our needs. The ground floor was completely transformed. In front, a spacious shop with elegant display windows to show our products. In back, an industrial kitchen with modern equipment. And in the center, a small cafe with tables for customers to enjoy our sweets with coffee or tea on the spot. Upstairs, we adapted the bedrooms for our home. The children were thrilled. For the first time, each would have their own room. Mother Catherine chose a room facing the back garden where she set up a small studio to return to practicing her other passion: painting. The inauguration of the new Catherine Suites happened on a Saturday afternoon in June 1971. The entire town seemed to be there. The mayor gave a small speech praising our entrepreneurship and cut the ribbon. The children, dressed in new clothes, distributed small samples of our sweets to guests. It was a day of celebration, recognition, harvest after so much effort. In the months that followed, business flourished even more. We hired more employees, expanded the menu, began accepting orders from neighboring towns. The children grew strong and healthy. David, now 10, already showed interest in the business side, always asking questions about costs and profits. Susan, at 8, had inherited her grandmother's culinary talent and was already creating her own recipe variations. Little Bobby, at 6, was the joy of the house, always making customers smile with his imaginative stories. It was on an ordinary October afternoon, almost 4 years after that fateful visit from Mrs. Catherine, that the past came knocking at our door again. I was at the counter, serving customers, when I saw him enter. Theodore, thinner, with gray streaks at his temples, but unmistakable. My heart raced. I hadn't seen him since the day he left home with a suitcase years before. I had heard from third parties that he had been transferred to a city in upstate New York after certain problems at the local bank, possibly related to the discovery of his double life. He hesitated at the entrance, looking around, clearly impressed with what he saw. Our small cafe was full. The sweet display case was impeccable, the employees in elegant uniforms serving customers. His eyes finally met mine, and he walked toward me. "Margaret," he said, his voice lower and less confident than I remembered. "You look beautiful." It was true that I had changed, not just physically, although I had let my hair grow and now dressed more elegantly, thanks to our improved financial situation. The most significant change was in my eyes, in my posture, in the confidence that radiated from me. "Thank you, Theodore," I replied politely. "What brings you here?" He seemed disconcerted by my calmness. Perhaps he expected tears, accusations, or even a warm reception. "I'm back in town," he explained. "I got a transfer back to the bank here and wanted to see how you all were doing. The children, Mom, you." I noticed he didn't mention Linda or the daughter they had together. Later, I would discover that Linda had married another man, and that little Emma, now 5 years old, had stayed with her mother. "The children are well," I answered without going into details. "Mother Catherine, too." "Actually, she's upstairs painting. Her health is excellent." An uncomfortable silence fell between us. There were so many unspoken things, so many years of separation, so much water under the bridge. "Can I see them?" he finally asked. "I miss my children and Mom." I hesitated. I didn't want to deny the children the right to know their father, but I also feared his presence would bring confusion and pain. They were small when he left, and their memories of him were vague, sometimes mixed with stories they heard from friends about the father who went away. "They're at school now," I replied. "They return at 5 if you want to wait." He nodded gratefully. "I'll wait. Can I sit there?" He pointed to a table in the corner. I agreed and returned to work, although my mind was buzzing. What would I tell the children? How would Mother Catherine react to seeing her son after so long? And more importantly, what did Theodore really want? The answer to this last question came faster than I expected. After having coffee and trying one of our cakes, praising effusively, of course, Theodore approached the counter again. "Margaret, This place is incredible. You and Mom, you've built something extraordinary." He seemed genuinely impressed. "I've been thinking, maybe we could talk about a possible fresh start." There it was, the real reason for his visit. It wasn't just missing the children or remorse for his actions. It was the glimpse of a thriving business, a comfortable life he could easily return to enjoying if I were naive enough to allow it. "Theodore," I said with a calm that surprised even myself, "I appreciate your visit and have no objections to you seeing your children. They deserve to know their father. But if you're talking about starting over in the sense of us being a couple again, that's not going to happen." His face showed shock, then a flash of irritation. "Margaret, it's been 4 years. People make mistakes. I made a terrible mistake, but I'm sorry. Think of the children." "I am thinking of the children," I interrupted. "I'm thinking they deserve to grow up seeing their mother respected and happy, not submissive to a man who betrayed and abandoned us when we needed him most." His features contorted into an expression of barely contained anger. For an instant, I saw the old Theodore, authoritarian, accustomed to getting what he wanted. But soon he controlled himself, realizing we were in public. "You've changed," he commented with a mixture of surprise and resentment. I smiled, a genuine smile. "Yes, I have changed. Life has a way of doing that, doesn't it? Sometimes what seems like a tragedy turns out to be the beginning of something wonderful." At that moment, the doorbell rang and the children entered, returning from school. David was the first to notice the stranger talking with their mother. His face showed confusion, then recognition. Susan and Bobby, following their brother's gaze, also stopped uncertainly. The meeting that followed was tense, emotional, and strange. The children, especially the younger ones, didn't know how to react to this man who was said to be their father. Theodore tried to be jovial, asking about school, about their friends, offering gifts he brought in his suitcase, as if gifts could compensate for years of absence. Mother Catherine, alerted by one of the employees, came down from her studio. The meeting between mother and son was even more complicated. There was hurt, disappointment, but also an undeniable bond that not even betrayal had been able to completely destroy. At the end of that afternoon, when Theodore finally said goodbye, promising to return to see the children regularly, I was alone in the bakery's kitchen, reflecting on the strange paths life takes us. 4 years before, I was a submissive wife, completely dependent on the man who was now begging for a second chance. The unexpected visit of an elderly lady I had never met before changed everything. It transformed my personal tragedy into opportunity, my despair into strength, my dependence into autonomy. "A penny for your thoughts," said Mother Catherine, entering the kitchen with her paint-stained apron still on. I smiled at her, this extraordinary woman who had become my mentor, my partner, my friend, my true family. "I was thinking about how life comes full circle," I replied, "and how sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what we're really capable of." She nodded, her wise eyes understanding perfectly what I meant. "You know what I'm most proud of in you, Margaret? It's not the bakery's success, although that's impressive. It's seeing how you blossomed, how you found your own voice." We took our cups of tea and went to the back porch, our favorite place to talk at the end of the day. The sun was setting, painting the sky in orange tones. The children's laughter playing in the garden was the perfect soundtrack for that moment. "He'll be back," I commented, referring to Theodore. "He won't give up easily." "Probably not," Mother Catherine agreed. "But that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that now you know exactly who you are and what you're capable of. And no one, not him, not anyone, can take that away from you." I sipped my tea, feeling the warmth spread through my body. She was right, as always. Whatever the future held, I would be ready. No longer as the fragile and insecure Margaret of the past, but as the strong, independent woman I had become, thanks to an unexpected visit that, paradoxically, ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. The following years brought changes I never imagined when I began this journey. Our bakery, Catherine's Sweets, was no longer just a local business, but had become a reference throughout the region. People traveled from neighboring towns, especially to try our sweets. We even received coverage from a women's magazine from Chicago in 1975 with the title, "The Sweet Queens: How Two Women Transformed Tragedy into Success." The article took up 3 pages with color photos of our shop and our most famous creations. Time doesn't pass without leaving marks. In 1977, when I was already 35 years old, Mother Catherine suffered a small stroke that left her with movement difficulties on her right side. It wasn't anything serious, the doctor assured, but she would need to slow down. For someone accustomed to working from dawn to dusk, that was a hard blow. However, with the wisdom that always characterized her, she found a new way to contribute, supervising our younger employees, passing on the secrets of old recipes, ensuring that quality standards were maintained. "Life sometimes forces us to change roles," she told me one afternoon, watching the shop's movement from her special chair we placed in the corner of the kitchen, but never to stop contributing. The children grew before our eyes. David, 13 in 1978, was almost a man, studying accounting in the neighboring city and coming home only on weekends. Susan, at 15, showed exceptional talent for confectionery, creating new recipes that soon became customer favorites. And Bobby, at 13, although not as interested in the business, was excellent in school and dreamed of becoming a doctor. As for Theodore, he kept his word to visit the children regularly, although there was always some tension in the air. He never completely gave up the idea of reconciliation, but as years passed, his appeals became less frequent, more resigned. Eventually, he met another woman, a widow who owned a small inn in town and remarried in 1976. We maintained a cordial, though distant relationship, more for the children's sake than any other reason. One Sunday morning in 1980, we were all gathered for lunch, a ritual we maintained religiously, even with David already living in the capital for his university studies. Mother Catherine, now 78 years old, occupied the head of the table, proudly watching the grandchildren she had helped raise. That's when the doorbell rang, interrupting our animated conversation. Susan, then 17, went to answer. She returned with a confused expression, accompanied by a young woman carrying a little girl by the hand. "Mom," said Susan hesitantly, "this is Mrs. Linda. She said she needs to talk with you." The name fell like a bomb in our dining room. Linda, Theodore's other woman, the mother of his daughter. I had never seen her, only heard about her. She was a beautiful woman with dark hair and sad eyes. The girl beside her, who must have been about 13 or 14, looked at the floor, clearly uncomfortable. A heavy silence took over the room. The children, no longer so childlike, looked from me to the newcomer, not knowing how to react. Mother Catherine was the first to recover from the shock. "Please come in," she said, indicating the sofa. "We were having lunch, but we're finished. Would you like some coffee?" Linda seemed as surprised by the cordial reception as I was by her visit. "Yes, please," she responded in a low voice. "And maybe a glass of water for Emma." Emma, my children's half-sister, the daughter Theodore had with this woman while still married to me. The girl raised her eyes for the first time, and I was impressed by how much she resembled Susan at the same age. "What brings you here, Linda?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, although my heart was beating fast. She took a deep breath before answering. "Theodore had an accident. A stroke, actually. He's in the county hospital." The news caught us by surprise. Theodore was only 43 years old, too young for a stroke, but stress, careless eating, perhaps the weight of his own choices. "Is it serious?" asked David, who had always maintained the closest relationship with his father among my children. Linda nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "The doctors aren't optimistic. He keeps calling for his mother, especially," she hesitated, looking at Mother Catherine, "especially you, Mrs. Catherine. He won't stop calling for his mother." I looked at my mother-in-law, worried about how this news would affect her. At 78, her health was reasonably good, but strong emotions could be dangerous. To my surprise, she remained calm, only a single tear rolling down her wrinkled face. "I'm going to get ready," she said, trying to get up from her chair. My son needs me. I helped her prepare, worried but respecting her decision. Meanwhile, in the living room, a curious scene unfolded. Susan had offered one of our chocolate cakes to Emma, and the two were talking shyly, discovering common interests. David and Bobby, more reserved, watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. When we arrived at the hospital, we were received by a grave-faced doctor. Theodore was in critical condition, he explained. The stroke had been extensive, affecting important areas of the brain. He was conscious but weak, and the next few days would be decisive. He asked to see his mother and children, said the doctor, looking at our heterogeneous group. I think it would be good to grant this wish. Mother Catherine entered first, supported by my arm. Theodore was unrecognizable in that hospital bed, pale, thin, tubes and machines everywhere. His eyes filled with tears when he saw his mother. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Forgive me." Mother Catherine approached, holding her son's hand tenderly. "It's all right, my son." Mothers always forgive. It was a scene I'll never forget. The meeting between mother and son, separated by hurt and lies, reunited again before the possibility of death. Then it was my children's turn to enter one by one to talk briefly with their father. Finally, Linda took Emma, who seemed scared but determined to see her father. I stayed in the hallway, uncertain whether I should enter too. There was no longer romantic love between us, but we shared a history, 3 children, years of life together, before and after the separation. "He's asking for you," said the nurse coming out of the room. "I think he wants to say goodbye." I entered the room with a heavy heart. Not for the man I once loved, that feeling had died long ago, but for the fragility of life, for the way destiny connects us, separates us, and sometimes reunites us in unexpected circumstances. "Margaret," he called weakly when I approached. "You came?" "I came," I replied simply, sitting in the chair beside the bed. "I wanted to say that I'm proud of what you built," he said with difficulty. "You proved I was wrong about everything." I didn't respond. There was no need. We held hands in silence, a gesture not of love, but of acceptance, of recognition for the path traveled. In the days that followed, we took turns at the hospital. Me, Mother Catherine, the children, and surprisingly, Linda and Emma. A strange alliance was created among us, women deceived by the same man, now united around his sickbed. Theodore survived, contrary to medical expectations, although with significant after-effects. He lost movement on his left side and had difficulty speaking. He could no longer work at the bank or live alone. His current wife, the widow who owned the inn, decided she hadn't signed up to care for an invalid and asked for divorce while he was still in the hospital. It was Linda who brought up the question no one wanted to address. What will we do with Theodore? He has nowhere to go and no conditions to take care of himself. We were in the bakery after closing hours. Me, Mother Catherine, Linda, and our older children. David and Susan on one side, Emma on the other. A strange family, united by even stranger circumstances. "He can stay with me," offered Mother Catherine, always ready to forgive. "I have space in my room upstairs." I shook my head, worried. "Mother Catherine, you're almost 80 years old. You can't take care of an adult man with special needs. It would be too much." "I could take him to live with me," said Linda timidly. "But my apartment is small and I work all day. Emma is still in school." A heavy silence fell over us. The irony didn't escape anyone. The man who had manipulated and deceived all of us now depended completely on our compassion. It was David who suggested the solution. What if we adapted the old storage room at the back of the bakery? The one we don't use anymore since we expanded the kitchen. We could turn it into a small apartment. That way we could all take turns caring without the burden falling on one person. The idea was sensible. The storage room was spacious, with independent entrance, and could easily be adapted to accommodate someone with reduced mobility. The cost wouldn't be prohibitive, and divided among all of us would be even more accessible. "Why would we do this?" asked Susan, expressing the doubt we all felt. "After everything he did?" Mother Catherine answered with the wisdom that only advanced age can bring. "We don't do this for him, dear. We do it for ourselves. For the peace of knowing that when faced with the choice between revenge and compassion, we chose the more difficult but more dignified path." And so it was done. In the following weeks, we worked together on renovating the storage room. Me, Linda, our children, even friends and bakery customers who learned of the story and offered to help. We installed ramps, support bars, adapted the bathroom for someone with reduced mobility. When Theodore was discharged from the hospital, it was to his new home, not a mansion, not a luxury apartment, but a dignified space, created with the work and compassion of people he had deeply hurt. The following years brought a new rhythm to our life. Theodore, humbled by dependence, initially resisted help, but over time, something unusual began to happen. Mother Catherine, despite her advanced age, spent hours talking with her son, reconciling with the past. My children, especially Susan, developed a routine of visits, bringing meals, reading books to their father, helping him with physical therapy exercises. Most surprising was seeing Linda and me develop an unlikely friendship. Two women who should have been enemies, united by a common experience and the desire to move forward. Emma, initially shy and reserved, flourished under the attention of her half-siblings, especially Susan, who took her under her wing and began teaching her the secrets of confectionery. In 1985, 5 years after Theodore's stroke, we celebrated the bakery's 20th anniversary with a big party. The shop had expanded again, now with branches in 2 neighboring towns. David, graduated in business administration, commanded the financial side of the business. Susan, after an advanced confectionery course in Chicago, had become head chef, creating new recipes that kept our tradition alive. Bobby, fulfilling his dream, was in medical school. And to my surprise, Emma, at 18, had asked to work with us during school holidays, showing a natural talent for cake decoration. During the celebration, I looked around and saw my family. Not the family I had imagined having when I married at 19, but the family that life, with its unexpected twists, had given me. Mother Catherine, now 83 years old, sitting in her special chair, watching everything with bright eyes. My children, confident and accomplished young adults. Linda, who had become my friend and confidant. Emma, who called Mother Catherine Grandma with the same naturalness as my own children. And even Theodore in his wheelchair, participating silently, a man transformed by illness and perhaps by regret. That night, when everyone had gone home and I was helping Mother Catherine up to her room, she stopped in the middle of the stairs, leaning heavily on my arm. "You know, Margaret," she said, looking at the family portrait we had just taken, and that was already framed on the stair wall. "When I knocked on your door that day, so long ago, I was desperate, looking for answers, searching for my son. I never imagined I would find a daughter in you." I felt tears in my eyes, moved by the words of this woman who had completely changed the course of my life. "And I never imagined that the most painful visit I ever received would end up being the greatest blessing of my life," I replied, hugging her carefully. Now, at 85 years old, looking back at that scared young woman I once was, I realize how unpredictable life is, how what seems like a catastrophe can be the beginning of an extraordinary journey. How losses can transform into gains, how wounds can heal and give way to something new and unexpectedly beautiful. Catherine Sweet's Bakery continues standing, now run by Susan and Emma, who became not just half-sisters, but business partners and best friends. David commands a chain of bakeries with our name in several cities. Bobby became a respected doctor, caring for the town's elderly, including in his final years, his own father. Mother Catherine left us in 1990, at 88 years old, peacefully during sleep. Theodore followed her a few months later, as if, even after everything, he couldn't bear his mother's absence. The mother he had hurt so much, and who, in the end, had become his greatest defender. Life is made of circles that close, of patterns we can only see when we look back. That unexpected visit that at first seemed like the destruction of everything I knew was, in reality, the beginning of a much richer, fuller, and more authentic life than I could ever have imagined. And that's what I want to leave with you, my dear viewers. Sometimes what seems to be the end of everything is just the beginning of something better. Sometimes we need to lose what we have to discover what we really deserve. And sometimes life surprises us in the most unexpected way possible. Like that April morning, so long ago, when an elderly lady knocked on my door asking why her son never visited her and changed my life forever. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Grandma's Diary for more stories like this one. Leave in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know who you are and what stories you'd like to hear next. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey of memories.